Hey everyone, good evening. Right, as you hear, will be a host for today. This is our first live session. Okay, today we have a fantastic topic and we have a fantastic guest. Approaching ISO for is this for everyone? Hi, I'm back. If you guys are tuning in right now via my LinkedIn profile or even my Azul Jamil Facebook, they do send some comments and some likes and some love because we have fantastic speaker, buddy of mine, far away from Sydney, Australia. We're going to talk about ISO 45000 because I've received a lot of queries about ISO 45000, and maybe you could be the best person to help you to resolve some of the issue, some of your concern, and some of your doubts regards to the implementation or audits. Right, without further ado, let me bring you, the guest. How are you, Andy?
I'm good as. How are you, mate?
I'm great, man. Right, so today's topic is about approaching ISO 45001. Is this for everyone? This is the topic that we chose for my first LinkedIn event. By the way, before we begin, this is the man, Andy Lewis, who have helped me with ISO 45000 migration, right? With my client. Technically, I have a client in Singapore. I do some training and consultancy called Primus Vision Private Limited, and Andy as well. Andy is director for WHS Australia. Yeah, Andy?
That's
Yes,
right.
and he's the man who actually assists me, and we got our ISO 45000. Yeah!
Well done.
Andy, maybe you want to
Congrats.
share. Andy, maybe you want to share a bit about yourself, Andy.
Yeah, so Andy Lewis, originally from the UK, northeast. So if I've got a bit of a funny accent, I do apologise. I've lived in Sydney for the last 10 years, worked with a number of businesses, and over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, last couple of years, I have helped a couple of businesses transition from 18,001 over to 45,001. One of the organisations was the first Bureau Veritas business in Australia and New Zealand to achieve that certification. So that was real good. And for me, health, safety, risk management, ISO certification, all the stuff that people tend to find really boring, I actually really enjoy. So hopefully we get plenty of questions. And it's just not me and you talking about golf or cricket for the next couple of hours.
Wow, fantastic introduction from Andy over there. Right, guys, if you are tuning in right now, do send our likes, send some comments. If you have any queries, in fact, I've sent this across many of my groups when they show some concern. Hopefully, this program or this event could benefit everyone when you have some issues with ISO 45000. Okay, without further ado, I think I want us to start the whole Q&A session with Andy. Right, Andy, maybe you want to share what is ISO 45001?
Yeah, so ISO 45001, it's the international standard for occupational health and safety management systems. It replaces 18,001, which was the old sort of proxy benchmark that a lot of organisations strive to achieve around health and safety.
All right. Okay, so why is ISO 45001 important?
So it's really important for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the International Labour Organization, the ILO, they estimate that around 2.78 million people die every year from work-related illness or disease. So that's around about 8,000 people a day, or one person every 12 seconds. It's really important because the standard aims to prevent workplace accidents, illnesses, injuries, and fatalities. So it's a really key piece of global standardization that can really make a difference to an organization. It doesn't really matter how big they are. or how many spaces the place. So there could be in the APAC region, it could be a global business, or it could be a small business, a bit like what I do and what you do. Obviously, your business is a bit bigger than mine, but so yeah, so it's one of those. It's really important for setting that benchmark and driving change.
Right. That's very humble of you, Andy. Okay, yeah. You have touched on small business. It's also for small business because what when they perceive of OHSAS, previously it was called OHSAS, yeah, OHSAS in 2001. Oh man, I lost Andy. Andy, where are you, Andy? Okay. I think we'll get Andy back. I think we just lost his connection somewhere. Okay. Initially, before we talk about ISO 45001, the first implementation of safety management system is okay. There you go. Yeah, get you back. What happened, man? Okay, no worries, no worries. Okay, you can hear me, right? Okay. So initially, before we talk about ISO 8001, okay, then they were supposed to transit into ISO 45001, and Andy have touched a very important part. And this ISO 45000 is for all businesses, for big, right, for medium, or even for small businesses like you and me. That's what you mentioned, and that's pretty much interesting. Right, interesting fact, okay, which I learned. I have complete my lead auditor course for ISO 45000, right, recently, and that's something that actually very interesting, where even small businesses could actually apply, right, ISO 45000 to their business, and that interesting. I think that we what we want to cover, and maybe Andy can give some elaboration on that
Can you
portion.
hear me now, Ez?
Yes, yeah, Andy, thank you. Welcome back, man. Yes. What happened?
I have no idea, but the microphone settings decided to default to something else.
Yeah, maybe you say something wrong.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it's LinkedIn doesn't like me.
Okay, Andy. Touch about that small. I mean, the ISO 45000 is for small, medium, yeah, and of course big MNC company, right? Maybe you want to share with us the benefit of implementing ISO 45001.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things around ISO 45001. We've touched on the human factor. So it helps drive that organizational benchmarking for culture and change and looking after our workforce. So and that's really important. The other thing is around how it is designed to meet and marry up with the other standards. So 9001 for quality, 14001 for environmental. And it works in, I'm going to use the word harmony with them. So they're really designed to be a benchmark for tri-certification. And it's really good that way. I think it doesn't matter whether you're a big business or whether you're a small business. There's other benefits to it as well. So, it puts safety at the forefront. It helps a business manage and reduce risk. It can also improve relationships with your workforce as well. So if traditionally your business hasn't been safety focused, and that's not a slight on any organization, obviously, as we get more mature as an industry and safety becomes more at the forefront, that's good. So businesses can change and grow, and it helps with communication and consultation and things like that. It's got a big impact on your customers and your suppliers and other stakeholders. So, if you're doing business, it's a real good door opener when you're having those initial pre-qualification conversations that, hey, we're ISO 45001 accredited. So it starts to give a bit of reassurance to your vendors, your suppliers, your partners, people like that. Again, when you look at reducing injuries and illness and workplace fatalities and things like that, the standard is designed to be unique to your own business as well. So if you can reduce downtime and you can reduce operational costs, that means that you're not hurting people. And getting individuals engaged in that level. And then the big thing is reputational and consumer trust. And I think that's that's a big thing at the moment. I've seen that in Australia where traditionally businesses would be certified because a government contract or a tender requires them to be certified. And it's sort of, it marries up with that to a lot of respects. But at the same time, you know, you're building on a reputation. So if you look at corporate social responsibility as a certification standard, social responsibility, sorry. If you're dealing with suppliers overseas and things like that, and you've got that certification, it makes trade and businesses a lot easier. And that's the beauty of ISO 45001. You know, it sets the benchmark, it drives continual improvement, and it's going to open opportunities for you. So those are the big key things for me. That is the benefits.
All right, thank you, Andy, for a very lengthy explanation. I think people will benefit from this explanation. Fantastic. All right, for in your own words, right? When they notice the initial, which is OHSAS in 2001, with various elements, they may be afraid. Well, this is a huge thing to implement, and now you are telling them to implement 45,000, right? ISO 45,000. What would be your advice for them, Andy?
So the first advice is don't be afraid. Yes. No, but I mean, seriously, there's a lot of businesses that don't go through certification because they go, that's the standard. Like, you know, how on earth am I going to do that? And a lot, it puts a lot of organizations off. And so the first bit of advice would be just don't be afraid. You know, it's a challenge. And if it was easy, it wouldn't add any value to your business. The second thing is that, again, if your internal team or you don't have a team, you know, if you think you're going to struggle with this, use your network. You know, use LinkedIn, reach out to people who've got a bit of experience, have that conversation. You know, I mean, you know yourself through the power of LinkedIn, there is no bad conversations you can have. So anything that's going to help and make life a little bit easier for you transitioning over or going for it, that would be the first thing. And I suppose the other thing is around your certification body. You know, you've got to have a really good relationship with your certification body. You know, I use Bureau Veritas, I've used SGS, I've used BSI. There are others out there. And I've used those both in Australia, throughout the APAC region, and back in the UK and Europe. So my trust with them is it's built over 18 or 20 years. But, you know, you've got to be comfortable and don't be afraid to fail. Because there's a lot of big businesses out there that don't get certification first time. And use that as a learning to keep on going forward, because you'll only get better.
Right. Very good. Okay, Andy, thank you. Right. So some of the concern when I was going through OHSAS previously, when we do our audit, normally we have a huge, massive filing system. You know, we have seen before, right? They have a stack up. You know, so before I come for my audit for both internal and external. Okay, that's based on my experience. Okay, based on my experience. They will have a very whole lot of filing system. So now, when you are telling us right now, you're telling the audience right now, this is okay for a small business to implement ISO. This will actually scare them. Wow, do you mean I need to have all this filing system in place before I can get my ISO 45000 certified? Your thoughts, Andy?
Look, it's an interesting one. I've seen some really, really big businesses have a really lean management system. You know, very, very strategic documents, quite high level. But then when it gets into management plans, legislation tables, things like that, that's where they tend to grow. For small businesses, you've got to remember, it's got to be relevant to what you do. So if I was going in to help a small business and they were doing construction work, you'd expect to see your method statements, your risk management plans, your training, your competencies, things like that. But at the same time, you'd expect that to be relative to what you're doing. One of my big bugbears is that method statements end up getting 70, 80, 100 pages long. And it's what is the high risk work? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to mitigate and manage? What controls do we need to put in place? And going through that system. So you've just got to remember it's got to be relevant to what your business is. There's no point having. Just imagine you try to implement NASA's management system for safety in a small business. Like, you'd end up with a haircut like me.
Okay. All right, man. Okay. All right. Okay. Now I'm interested. To have myself a company of mine ISO 45000. So how do I go about getting that certification, Andy?
So there's a couple of things. First of all, if you're migrating from 18,001 up to 45,001, so what you do is you get in touch with your certification body, your account manager, or your business manager, and they should be able to give you a excuse me, almost like a pre-audit document. So it's almost like a self-assessment. So you work through that. And then from there, you'll arrange your dates, you'll give enough time, the business will be prepped for it. You'll go through, you'll upgrade your documents, and then you'd go through for your audit, like you normally would. The other side of the coin is that if you're a business that hasn't been certified to an international standard before, go out and find your certification body. Have that conversation. You might be comfortable and confident with the documents and the processes and your system that you've got right now. That's great. If you're not, speak to a consultant, speak to other businesses, speak to your peer group and, other professional networks and understand their pain, where they went through. And then, you agree it, you commit, and, you dive headfirst into the fun.
All right. So you need to take the risk, yeah?
Yeah, look, that's it. As a safety and risk professional, we say don't do anything that's risky. But then when you look at certification, it's a big risk. There's the idea of failure, and everyone sees failure as a bad thing, and it's not. It's just you've got to learn and do something different. And the risk is that if you don't get on this and you don't start going through that process, you're going to miss out. There could be opportunities from a work perspective, from a cultural change perspective. You might miss the boat on that. So there's so much good that can come from taking that risk. I'd encourage everyone to do it.
Fantastic. I think that's a great advice, guys. So don't be afraid. That is a calculated risk. I think the benefits that Andy had mentioned earlier, that could just overcome whatever fear that you have by implementing. Don't be afraid, guys, because this is designed to help small companies as well, right? And medium. Right. Is there any notice, Andy? Notice they need to give before you change from OHSAS 8001 surveillance into transition audit?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I always say give yourself enough lead time into the transition audit as possible. But you've also got to give yourself enough lead time to fix any of the opportunities for improvement or the non-conformances that might come through. So as much time as you can physically allocate, and that works for both sides of the fence as well. If you look at the certification body as well, so whoever is going to come in and do the audit, you'll find that these guys are relatively lean as a business. They'll have to plan their schedule of work and things like that. So if you work with a specific auditor, or there's someone who understands your style of business, you might want to use them. So you'll need to have that conversation as well with your certification body. And yeah, the key is time. You've got to remember as well, excuse me, March 2021 is the final date that you can transition from 18,001 to 45,001. So, we're in September now. My recommendation would be you sort of need to get on the horse and get focused, because that's only 6 months.
Oh, yeah, I think for Singapore, they give us some extension due to COVID-19. I'm not sure whether Australia provide that.
No, I think that's everyone, mate. That's everyone.
Okay, yeah, very good to know. Okay, guys. Okay, when I noticed when the first time when we actually was being introduced to OHSAS in 2001, I want to reflect back on when we created the documentation. Normally, it would take like 3 to 6 months to create a very comprehensive documentation. Now with the introduction of transition of ISO 45,000, estimated duration to complete all this documentation, Andy, based on your experience.
Look, it's how long's a piece of string, and the reason I say that is that we've got a bit of an issue right now in Australia where there are some businesses who are saying that we can get you certified or get you ready for certification in 4 to 6 weeks. And as a professional, I have concerns with that. Going through audits and everything, I don't think that's a realistic time frame. You might be able to get some templates and cram information in there, and then you might end up with a lot of non-conformances. You might have wasted your money from a certification perspective. What I would say is that normally I say to people, give yourself 6 to 12 months realistically, and it's a journey. This isn't 100 meters. You're not Usain Bolt. You're Mo Farah. You've got a long road. Yeah, look, it's one of those things that it's going to take time. But again, set yourself a timeline, set yourself that goal, but don't be afraid to push it back. That's part of the journey that you're going on. That fits really good into ISO 45,001 as well, because it's around that continuous improvement.
All right, thank you. Andy, before we proceed further, there's a comment by Jordan Gruber. How do I pronounce that? Yes, right. He mentioned got it, take risks to reduce risks, achieving gold standard ISO 45,000 ain't easy, but keep your people safer and give your business the edge. Thank you for the comment, Jordan. Right. Feel free to drop your comment to Andy if you have any question related to ISO. I myself have some question for him. That's a question coming from me. Yeah. Anyway, the reason why I took up the lead auditor course previously, not to just transit, because I was once an external auditor myself, right? Lead auditor myself. That one of the things that I was very curious, because someone came to me, the earlier batch who have took this course, ISO 45,000 mentioned, Ezri, that is a new thing, about ISO. And then what is that? Now we need to get feedback from our workers. So really, yeah. So every decision you make, you need to get feedback from workers. I was like, whoa, it's a very good, I would say, approach. But I'm not sure how does the management going to take it. All decision you must get the workers, feedback. In order for them to implement certain things. So by definition, under ISO 45,000, who is this worker? Andy, maybe you can elaborate further. Who is this worker?
So workers, so in a sense of an organization, so if you're a big business, a worker is anyone from the CEO down to the apprentice. So it's really important that communication, consultation and collaboration as you go through. So, and that doesn't mean that you sit everyone down in the room at the same time and say, what is your thoughts and opinions on this? It's good to break it into business units. So if you're a business unit, let's say in construction, you might have excavators, you might have excavators, directional drillers, concreters, you might have brickies, you might have the guys who operate the cranes and things like that. So use the toolbox talks, use your take fives or whatever you call them, to consult with them and have a conversation with method statements and your risk management plans and risk assessments. One of the worst things that I think happens is that the safety professional goes and does the risk assessment and goes, we've got the risk assessment. And then you go on the site and you start talking to the people who are doing the work and they go, mate, I don't know who thought this up. Why didn't they come and talk to me? So, and that's the key thing about ISO 45001. It looks for worker engagement. So yeah, so it can be in any form. Those are just some examples. I will say this though, the standard also says worker is, it can be a contractor, a subcontractor, some outsourced work. It could be if you're interacting with local council, members of the public. So it's pretty broad and generic. In Australia, we call that a PCBU, so person conducting undertaking or business or undertaking. And that was traditionally because the voluntary sector, so people who worked in charities and things like that, they weren't really aligned to the safety legislation. So they brought in PCBU. Thankfully, ISO 45001 just refers to it as a work. So it's anyone that has a touch point.
Wow, all right. So I got some clear. So everyone, including CEO, Andy, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, when I was the director of safety, risk, and corporate compliance at Wink, I used to have regular catch-ups with the CEO and the chief operations officer, and they were genuinely interested in how do we progress our safety culture. And that when I joined that business, the health and safety management system wasn't really in a good place. And I think that's fair to say. But going through that process, it had upgraded and upgraded, and it got better. Now, the idea of continual improvement is a key one. And just because you've achieved something, don't just stop. You've got to set the target. You've got to drive to the next level. Because ultimately, people like me and you, we get involved into health and safety, and it's normally a secondary career. But, we genuinely care about workforce and making sure that people get to go home. And that's the beauty of the standard, so everyone's got that touch point. Because you've got to remember as well, the CEO has got to sign your health and safety policy.
True, exactly. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you mentioned something about continual improvement. Maybe you can elaborate further about the difference between improvement and continuous improvement, right? In ISO 45001. Maybe you can elaborate that, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. So continual improvement is what I call your aspirational goals. So it's where do you want to be in 3, 5, 7, 10 years time. So what do you want to achieve over that longer period, and how are you going to drive to get there? So that's continual improvement. Your improvements, your short-term wins. So anything that can take up to 12 months, that's what I call an improvement. So if you look at improving your safety training, you're not going to do that overnight, but you're going to set as a target to be a short-term thing. You might do it over 3 or 6 months. So by the time you come to your surveillance audit in 12 months' time, you've got demonstrable evidence. You might look at revising your procedures or some of your processes or your management plans, and also your targets and objectives for the next sort of 12 months. Those are your improvements. So those are the short-term quick wins that you can get over the line. And continual improvement is you're just going to drive forward and you're going to try and be the next best thing in safety, in risk management, in your business. So you go through that way.
All right. Okay. Fantastic. I think it's very clear now with improvement and continuous improvement, right? So you have short-term and long-term goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Earlier you mentioned about the CEO is also the worker. I love that portion because I have one more question to ask. Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the CEO being also classified as the worker or identified as worker in ISO 45001. If that is so, then there's one new element that arises from ISO is the leadership, right? And who will drive the leadership? Then is if the CEO is the worker himself.
Yeah. So look, mate, that's a really good question, and that's something that we get asked all the time. I think as safety and risk professionals is who. So for me, an organisation's culture is set by the CEO, and what I mean by that is that if the CEO wants safety to be one of the businesses or the organisation's foundations, they will make that happen. So it's an interesting one. So, and then what happens is the CEO, his drive gets fed down to the executive leadership team. So the executive leadership team will all be told that health and safety is our priority for X, for Y, for Z. You're all executive leaders within your group, so you need to make sure that your people are safe. And then from there, you get your sort of like your senior leadership level, and this is sort of like the level where I sort of tend to float around. So I will work extremely closely with a chief operations officer or a CEO, because they want to know what's going on, and not in a bad way. They're not sort of saying, we've had these incidents. Why are we having these incidents? They say, we're having these incidents. What can we do to manage and mitigate it? So that's the type of driver it needs to be. One of the things that sort of is counterintuitive is when health and safety and that type of sort of stuff sits under HR, because for me, it doesn't set up an organization for success. When you're looking at making sure that you've got a direct line to the most senior person in the business to make strategic organizational changes and making safety front and center, it needs to be to the chief operations officer or to the CEO. So for me, you've got to have that direct line. Once you start going to the HR, people and culture sort of remit, things tend to get a bit fluffy and lost. So you've got to have the ear of the top person. So the CEO sets the culture, the executive leadership team drives the vision, and then people like me and you come in and we do our best to make the workplace as safe as physically possible, reduce harm, reduce risk, and make sure that everyone goes home.
Thank you. And you touch a very important point. Normally during my training, people ask me, Azril, who do the person in organization who actually drive the management system? And there you go. You just mentioned the word CEO.
Yeah. Look, for me, it's almost like if you look at a sports team, you've got the Singaporean national football team. And, you've got your manager, and your manager is effectively your CEO, because he's going to put the captain in place who might be his chief operations officer. And then he's got to pick the right people to fit in that area that are going to do a specific job. But they all need to gel together. And this is the reason why the England haven't won a tournament since 1966. Is we've had some good CEOs. We've had some good CEOs. But the chief operations officer or the captains have been pretty average, and the rest of the team have just done their own thing. But yeah, it's an interesting. I think that's the best way to describe it. Or you look at cricket. You've got the head of, you've got the head coach. Or Formula One, you've got your team principal, and then you've got you've got to have that flow on. So it's got to be key. You know, you've got to have trust, you've got to have leadership, but you've got to have open communication as well.
I agree. Yeah, that's why I raise up that question, because they told me that safety will drive the management system. I say no, we don't. Yeah, it's supposed to be the top CEO who actually set the culture, which Andy just mentioned. Okay, so you don't hear only from me, and you heard from Andy himself, one of the expert in ISO. So we have conquered, all right, that CEO should drive the culture, not safety. It should not be that way, right?
I don't like that word expert, mate.
Come on, Andy. All right, we have some comment coming from Ismail Hussein. Informative discussion. Thanks both of you, sir. Thank you, Ismail, for tuning in and giving a comment. Appreciate it, Ismail.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we got one more from, I don't address this, Cassidy, is it? Great topic. Yeah, is one of the topic that I raised. Thank you, Cassidy, for commenting. Yeah, this is one of topic that I've discussed with Andy to start off my first LinkedIn live session, and how we can actually add value to the LinkedIn, to my LinkedIn friends, to the followers, even to associate as well. Then whatever that we can provide during this discussion that be helpful. Then this is where we have this comprehensive discussion where Andy will share with us based on his experience, because he have personally helped me. That's why I have to. This is the second time I mentioned during the live, right? That he have helped me to get my ISO 45000. Of course, I do have some background in auditing, but 45001 is totally a new thing for me. When I look at the whole element, I say, wow, I need to need to shift back, my certain element to certain main element, right? Then maybe you want to share what are the huge difference in ISO 45000 as compared to the previous 8001.
So look, it's a really interesting one, because for me, I think the difference between sort of 18,001 and ISO 45001, it's only maybe 15 or 20%. And the key things are around sort of like context of the organization. So what does the business do, and how does that have an impact on safety, not only for your business, but for your clients, your vendors, your contractors, and things like that. Under Section 4, there's legal and other requirements. So what are your legal requirements? What must you do to protect your workforce? And that's things like having a legal register that's relevant. What I have seen is that a number of businesses who operate, we'll call it globally, but they only operate in maybe 3 or 4 different countries around the world. But they've got legislation for every country across the world. And you're just like, who thought this was a good idea? It needs to be relevant. And that's one of the big things. I think targets and objectives is another big thing under Section 4. Does your business set, there's a lot of discussion around, should we be using lead and lag indicators, LTIs, MTIs, TRIFR, things like that. Again, my opinion is that you need those lead and lag indicators. Those lag indicators are the snapshot in time where your business is right now. So if you've got LTIs that are at 8, you can say that over the next 12 months, we're going to drive that down and we're going to halve it. So you've got to set your targets and your goals. How do you work towards them? If you fall short, that's not like, hold your hands up. We didn't achieve this, but we know why. It might have been a resource issue. It could have been your training might have not been up to speed. There could have been external factors. So, it's always about going back and evaluating what happened, why did it happen, why did we miss that? And, ISO 45001 doesn't say you've got to achieve this. It says you've got to have the targets and objectives and you've got to strive for it. So it's a change in mindset. Obviously, we've touched on worker consultation and things like that. Excuse me. Interested parties, vendors, suppliers, contractors, members of the public. Again, you've got to think about how you do business can have a touch point on the community. Um,
Yep.
Section 5 refers to leadership and leadership commitments. So the CEO, you might be a CEO of a global business, but you might not have a health and safety team. So you've got to commit to resourcing it. You've got to have the right people in the right places, the right structure. You've got to look at better safety communication. So again, traditionally what would happen is there's your toolbox talk. And you'd get onto site and the guys would go and girls would go, great. So how do you communicate your safety message? One of the things that I've found that's worked really well is there's an injured workers program that I've used quite a lot in Australia. And it's where people come in and tell their story of how they got injured at work. So it's for me it's the nuts and bolts. So it's that communication piece. We've got to strive to have an incident-free workplace. And that for me, that's the beauty of why ISO sort of fits into that vision zero, because it's a vision, it's aspirational. We might never get there, but we're going to have one really good go at trying to get there. I think, you look at the commitment to improving your management systems and how you work with interested parties, so things like that. So I think if anyone's got the standard, go and have a look at Section 4 and Section 5. Those are the big key differences between 18,001 and 45,001.
Fantastic. Right. I think you guys need to refer back to ISO 45,000. If not, you guys not going to be able to visualize. Not Andy. Andy is an expert, just as fingertip of Section 5, Section 6. Wow. You guys need to refer back to ISO to actually visualize what he's talking about. And I think that is actually makes sense about leadership and so on. Right. Andy, maybe there is one portion I think I want you to share about how should you determine the risk and opportunity, because when you talk about previously, we talked about risk assessment, right? Hazard analysis in OHSAS in 2001. Now they mentioned the word risk and opportunity that was mentioned in ISO 45,000. Maybe you can elaborate that portion.
Yeah. So risks and opportunities, it's exactly what it sounds like. So from a business perspective, what are your opportunities? Where can the business go? What do you need to do? Things like that. And the risk is, how do we manage it? So it could be your risk falling from heights through that place. The other side of that is you're looking at risks and opportunities from your clients and your vendors and your suppliers and that type of environment. It's a tough one. And it's, to be honest, it's where risks and opportunities is one of the key areas where businesses struggle with transitioning. And everyone, look, you go, oh, we'll do a SWOT analysis. And you go, yeah, okay, SWOT analysis, they're great. And everyone has lost significant days of their life doing a SWOT analysis. If you're the CEO of a business and you don't know your threat is the direct competitor, or your head of sales doesn't realize that by not having a valid online portal where people can go buy a service or a product, there's a bit of a red flag there. From the same perspective, if your health and safety team are going, well, we know we've got high risk work, that's great. What are you doing about it? And if you're engaging subcontractors or contractors, what are they doing about it? So it's bringing all that information together, and then, there's nothing like health and safety isn't a new thing. There's no need to go and reinvent the wheel. I'll be honest, health and safety and risk management is the only industry where you can get away with plagiarism, because every safety professional, it's true, every safety professional will be on the phone to the mates or the colleagues or the peers and go, have you got a management plan for this? And someone will go, yeah, bang, there you go. So before you know it, a good document gets shared around the world. And and you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to your network, to put a question up on LinkedIn. So that risks and opportunities thing, it's such a broad thing, and that's why people get caught out of it. What I like to do to manage that is I almost put it into sort of like a strategic plan document. So what are our risks? What are our opportunities? And going forward, how do we manage that? And what can we share with our clients, our vendors, our suppliers, the community? Because, like I said, safety, there should be no IP. If we know something is going to make something safer, we should be giving this to everyone and saying this can make a significant difference. And that's the way that I've always dealt with that.
All right. I love the part you said there's no plagiarism in safety. Fantastic. Yeah, I heard that a lot. We say there is no such thing as copy in safety. You can just use. That's the reason why we have best practices, right? It's for us to emulate, to model after another organization. Yes, that's the beauty of safety implementation. All right. Talking about risk and opportunity, I think I want to touch about opportunity. If people want to ask you question with regards to ISO 45001, how are they going to get connected with you, Andy?
Look,
Maybe you want to.
I'm really active on LinkedIn, so that's your first port of call. And honestly, genuinely, go onto LinkedIn, send a connection request. My mobile number's on there. My email address is on there. Send me, get in touch with me. And I will say this as a safety professional, and obviously you're a member of IOSH as well. That's one thing that gets drilled into us, is that be open, be forward thinking, and share that information. So LinkedIn's probably the best way. My email, my mobile's on there. Maybe don't ring me at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Maybe send me a text. That'd be good. But yeah, that's the easiest way, man.
All right, fantastic, guys. You can connect with Andy via LinkedIn. Okay, Andy Lewis, right? Full name for. Okay, you can just PM him. Right. Somehow the time is moving faster than expected. Now we're already at 43 minutes and 48 seconds. In Singapore right now is 8:18. I'm sure some of our friends in Australia or even UK is actually tuning in. I see some likes and love over there, and a few people have tuned in, which is good. Not to worry. We have this. This is recorded. I will have this particular recording. If you missed it, you can always go to my Facebook page or even my LinkedIn page, Primus Vision Private Limited. Right, and you also can tune in my YouTube channel, Ezreal Jamil Official. And if you have seen that, do subscribe to my channel for more information. And this is not the last time we have conversation with experts like Andy when talk about ISO. Maybe you can talk about many things that could actually benefit benefit our circle. This is called sharing. There's nothing there's no sales there, nothing. There's nothing that to incentivize us. This is where we give back. This is where we share our knowledge so that we can help our fellow safety professionals, right, to benefit from this sharing. Things that I get from this conversation with Andy for the past 45 minutes, things like, for example, ISO, the benefit of ISO 45001, and for those who have already embarking into OHSAS, you need to actually transit by the following year, and they mentioned March, right? March 2021.
March 2021.
Then Singapore we have extended, right? Then this particular ISO 45000 is for every company. Don't be afraid, right, to take that risk. This will actually help, help your organization to have a very strong safety culture with the new president of ISO 45000. It's not only for big MNC company, it's also for medium and for small company as well. Right? This is some takeaway. Of course, in terms of the technicality that Adrian mentioned, I think some of you have missed it. That's the reason why this is a good opportunity to record this so that you can refer back, can reflect back, can review whatever Eddie had mentioned, and then we can take some notes over there. Right? All right. So that's about the discussion today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Andy. I thank you, Andy, for sharing. A whole lot of knowledge over there. I personally benefited, man.
As always, mate, it's always a pleasure to speak here, and thank you for for inviting me to have a chat about ISO 45001, and hopefully people have got past my droney accent and have taken something away from this conversation.
Not to worry, Andy. I think your accent is fine. I meant worse. I shared with you before. I can't even decipher what he's talking about. I think after talking for a while, begin to understand every word I think is simply put it across very nicely. I don't think people face some challenge, right? So this will not be the last time you do this. Don't worry, Andy. We have some discussion about safety. We can talk about culture. We can talk about anything. Right, that feel free, guys, to put in some comments. What are the questions? What are the topics that we want us to talk about? Maybe I can bring Andy back, or I can bring other experts to talk about it. And at the end of the day, social media platform is about sharing. It's about brainstorming ideas. Okay, it's about portraying whatever that inside your heart now. You want to share that, and you want to put this piece of onto the media platform for people to see, people to comment. Something that we can learn from each other. So that's what I love about social media. That's the reason why I created this live LinkedIn platform. Andy, any last word for those who are tuning in? If they're really serious about embarking after they have heard from you and now they are very excited, they want to implement this for the first time. Maybe any last word from you, Andy?
Look, like I said at the start, don't be afraid. If people think that it's going to be difficult, there is going to be challenges, but embrace it, because it will make a big difference to your organization, how you look at safety, how you drive that culture. And like I say, we're not doing this for any other reason that, we like looking at each other on TV. So, it's all about trying to share as much information as we possibly can with as many people as you can. And like I say, if you get stuck, just reach out and ask. I've never met a safety professional that has knocked back anyone who's had a genuine question. So just reach out and ask. I think both of us are really comfortable in trying to help as many people as we can.
Right. Someone just dropped us a comment. Tian Yang Lim. Hi, Mr. Tian. Andy, you know him, Andy? He's your friend? Yes, I. Great for you.
He's a part of the Aposho group. So
wow, okay. I saw a lot of accolades over there, right? Another safety practitioner. Hi, Mr. Tian. Thank you for tuning in. Right. I think we will end here for now. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much, Andy, once again. Don't forget, SMS system is a documentation, right? It's purely documentation, right? You need to actually implement it. Okay, you actually need to embrace it before you can see the difference. If not, it's just another paper exercise. We don't want this to happen, right? Because for the 5001, we have to see some different leadership, culture, right? And
it's driven from the top.
Yeah, from the top. Right. Thank you so much, guys. I'll see you guys again in my next meeting event. Okay, Andy, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Okay, guys. See you guys again.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. All right.